It's terrific to be linked with rail trails. First and foremost, I love riding my bike. And I think that's a spin-off from reporting on the sport of cycling for so many years. And I guess there came a time when I thought to myself, well, I better practice what I preach. And I'm so glad I did. I played soccer from the age of 6 to 42. And then when I started limping into the office on a Monday morning after being hacked to death by my over 35 opponents, I thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't play football. So I took to the bicycle when I was 42 to remain active. And that was 20 years ago. And I haven't looked back since. But it all started when I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be in media. I wanted to be in some form of media, whether it be radio, television, newspapers, and I'm grateful that I've done it all. I knew from a very young age, I used to share a bedroom with my younger brother and sister. And at 6 o'clock every morning as a 7 or 8-year-old, I remember having the transistor radio next to my pillow. I would turn it on ever so softly so I wouldn't wake my siblings. And I would listen to announcers, listen to the way they delivered their program, whether it be talk back, although there probably wasn't too much talk back then. There was a lot of talk and music. And I guess traffic reports and weather reports back in those days when I was that age. But I knew that I wanted to be in broadcasting in some way. And so in 1987, I managed to get a job as a soccer journalist. I went to the World Cup in the 90s, USA 94, France 98, the European Championships in 96. And through all that, I also dabbled in cycling as a sport reporter. And you may remember, prior to the tour down under, there was an event down the east coast of Australia called the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic. And that's where I cut my teeth really in cycling. I knew nothing about the sport, but I knew that by reporting and attending an event that was outdoors, it gave me two reasons for being, and that was one, I could get out of the office and enjoy the countryside, and that's what cycling brings you. And two, even though I knew nothing about the sport, I knew that there were ways to cover an event that very few Australians, including myself, knew little about. And that's what inspired me, I think. Why do they race in packs? Why is there a flat stage? Why is there a stage where there are mountains? All this sort of thing. And apart from that, I felt I could create stories and find stories behind the scenes with massage therapists, soigneurs, the politics that make up a team in a professional cycling race. So through that, well, at the same time, I was actually logging the daily highlights that was coming in from British television, which provided the daily highlights of every stage of the Tour de France. And although I hadn't gone over there, I was in the office logging all the pictures. So I think through my apprenticeship, I was given the opportunity to go to the Tour de France for the first time, and that happened in 1996. I went over there and they said to me, look, all we want you to do is top and tail it, Australianize our coverage. And back then it was, again, just daily highlights, 21 daily highlights programs. So I did that, but I felt it's pretty boring just saying, hello, welcome to stage one of the Tour de France. I'm Michael Tomalaris. This is what's coming up. And then after half an hour, well, I hope you enjoy that. That was pretty cool, wasn't it? 3 Australians started in 96. And I think I remember their names now. Scott Sunderland was one from Inverell in New South Wales, Pat Yonker from Adelaide in South Australia, and the third one was Neil Stevens from Canberra. And they were the three. And I think the reason why management wanted an Australian journalist over there, I guess I was a journalist slash host, was to Australianize the coverage, because prior to 96, the coverage seen on an Australian television was very British. because we were taking the ITV Britain coverage, and as you'd expect, they were basically just concentrating on their riders. And they didn't have many riders back then. They really only had Chris Boardman. Whilst at the same time, there was a wave of Australians coming across. Robbie McEwen, Stuart O'Grady, Henk Vogels, Brad McGee. And the Australian numbers just kept building and building and building. And back then, when the Aussies were participating, it was an achievement simply for them to be selected into a team. Nobody expected any of the Australians to win stages or even come second or third in the stage. But that all changed when, well, first of all, prior to me being there, Phil Anderson, he was the first non-European to wear the yellow jersey. But when I arrived, Stuart O'Grady became the second Australian to wear the Tour de France yellow jersey. And to wear the Tour de France yellow jersey, they say it's the most prestigious item of clothing in world sport. So when Stewie got the yellow jersey and Robbie started winning stages, and in the end he won 12 in his career. And then Brad McGee wore the yellow jersey soon after. In fact, 8 Australians have now worn the yellow jersey since my time. I could rattle them off, but I could rattle them off one by one, but I won't do that just now. Time permits. But look, people ask me, what was your biggest memory as a host, presenter of the SBS coverage of the Tour de France, which ran from 96 to 2021, so 26 years. Well, without a doubt, it was Cadel Evans winning. And like I said prior, who would have thought when I first arrived that an Australian would win the Tour de France, would stand on the podium wearing the yellow jersey in Paris on the Champs-Elysees? I never thought that would happen so early in my career. It happened in 2011. And yeah, and I've seen cycling grow as a television spectacle, whilst at the same time, as I've gotten older, and whilst people from Australia who would watch the Tour de France, and the numbers grew exponentially over the years. Just a little tidbit. When I first covered the Tour in the 90s, the viewing numbers were so small, we could literally record each of the daily highlights programs on VHS, as it was back then, and post them to the viewers that were watching. That's how small and minute our viewership was. But as a result of the success of the Australians, and it would be remiss of me to also mention Lance Armstrong. Love him or hate him, he played a big role in the viewing numbers increasing before he was banned for life. Why? I guess because professional cycling traditionally has been a European-dominated sport, enjoyed by Europeans for the most part. But when Lance came along, he spoke our language. He wasn't European. He was aggressive. And we learned later on, perhaps he was over-aggressive. He was a bit of a bully boy. But despite all that, he played a big role in attracting television viewers and also, I think, putting people of our vintage on bicycles. We were inspired by him because he was, I guess, one of us. And I say that only because he speaks our language. He's an Australian, we all know that, but he doesn't speak a foreign language. And I think we had an affinity towards him, as well as the Australians who enjoyed success. So
Mike, perhaps I can ask a couple of questions, just to give you a bit of a breather, give your vocal cords a bit of a rest. So in the same way as the F1s and the grand car designers have produced tremendous advances in automotives. So let's say, for instance, power windows, power steering, air conditioning in every car. There's been tremendous advances, which really started with Mercedes and Ferrari and what have you, really from racing. Tell us what your thoughts are, the connection between professional cycling and the increase of cycling recreationally across the country. And then once we get there, then we'll talk about road and off-road cycling in comparison.
Well, you know, a lot of people have written to me and told me over the years that they accidentally started watching the Tour de France and fell in love with it because it's not a code of football that we traditionally have. You know, the football codes have been instilled in our makeup as Australians over the decades. And the Tour de France in the middle of winter in July, a lot of people wanted something different. They would channel surf. They would perhaps accidentally bump into the Tour and thought, well, this is interesting. I wonder what this is all about. Why are they racing across beautiful fields of sunflowers? Why is this race 3 weeks long? And they got sucked in. To the point where they would perhaps buy an indoor bike, an indoor trainer, buy themselves a huge screen from Bingley or JB Hi-Fi, put it up on their wall, take 3 weeks holidays in July and pretend they were in the peloton with Chris Froome or Cadell Evans or Lance Armstrong or Robbie McEwen. And that's how the love for cycling, from being a sport that they would watch, changed them to being a recreation that they would enjoy when the Tour de France had finished. Perhaps they just basically fell in love with something. They felt that they could ride a bike and not necessarily race a bike, but certainly enjoy what the bike has to offer at a recreational level. So there was an offshoot from watching cycling as a sport to enjoying the bicycle as a recreation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, absolutely right. So, so how does that translate into, because we're all, there's more cars on the road. We're all very concerned about safety on the road. Many of the audience love riding on the road, of course. That's where we all cut our teeth as well. But the reality is that riding on the road is not as safe as it used to be. People are distracted by their phones and whatnot, and just driving over cyclists and not even noticing. So a lot of people, especially women and especially more senior people and especially children, have really turned away from the roads and are looking for a new avenue to cycle upon. So clearly rail trails is potentially fills that void to a degree. I'm sure you agree. And so the question, I guess, for you is, how do we use the experience and love of cycling to then embrace the usage of rail trails and the utilization of both the bicycle and the trail to enhance that community?
That's why I'm here. I'm here because I have a real passion and I believe in the rail trail concept. The big cities of Australia are a dangerous place to ride a bicycle. And even though I ride on the road by myself sometimes, but generally with a group wearing Lycra, I enjoy the safety that the rail trail and the cycleways have to offer. Cycling has so many layers, whether it be in a group situation wearing Lycra, whether it be on the cycleways with your loved ones, whether it be your spouse or your children, whether it be commuting to work, whether it be on gravel or a mountain bike. There are so many layers that the bicycle has to offer. And I think the mindset, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, has really changed. It's not a case of us and them anymore. I've noticed a lot of motorists respect the cyclists. We've still got a long way to go, but the attitudes have certainly changed. But I think the rail trail concept is brilliant. I've been to a lot of rail trails around the country since I discovered them, and I accidentally bumped into Rail Trails Australia at the Micro Mobility Conference when I met Peter for the very first time about a year ago. And I thought, this is pretty cool. I love Australia. I love to travel within Australia. I do most of my travel in the car, not on a plane. Why? Because I can throw my bike in the back of the RAV4 that I have and go to places like Tumbarumba, go to places like Warburton and Lilydale in Victoria, go to places like Scottsdale in Tasmania where there's a rail trail. I've done the Northern Rivers Rail Trail. I've done the rail trail at South Burnett, which took me from Mergen to Kingaroy. And I'm so happy to hear that the Byron Shire has approved the second leg of the Northern Rivers Rail Trail. That is just brilliant. I was the Australia Day ambassador for Crookwell in southern New South Wales last year. And I was very encouraged when the mayor of the Upper Lachlan Valley Council said to me, I'm determined to ensure that the rail trail from Crookwell to Goulburn goes ahead. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. But she also told me that there was a lot of resistance from farmers, which I couldn't understand. But about 3 or 4 months after Australia Day of 2022, I learned that Crookwell, Upper Lachlan Valley Council had lost its bid to construct this rail trail, which was devastating for me, having worked there for a short time as the Australia Day ambassador. It's their loss, and like you said during the meeting earlier today, Tumbarumba is a great example. I'm watching Vision right now. It injects so much to the local economy. I spoke to the local mayor at Tumbarumba. What's the name of the shire down there? Can't remember the name of the shire. Snowy Valleys Shire. And the mayor at the time said to me, there was a lot of resistance from the loggers, the big burly blokes that work down there. Tumbarumba is a logging town. And the council and the councillors had received a lot of resistance from this rail trail that was opened last year, because they said, we're not going to have these cyclists, these wimps coming to my town where we are the hard men of the snowy mountains. We wear flannelette shirts. And you know what? When the rail trail opened, the people started coming. They started spending money at Rosewood and also Tumbarumba and the regions around. The loggers were the first ones to put their hand up, and they said, we were wrong. We were wrong. We're so glad that the rail trail is here. So, you know, like I said, I speak your language, you speak my language. And if there's anything I can do to support this cause in the future, I'm there for you. I love the fact that I've introduced my wife to cycling. I was riding by myself when I was going solo on the roads of Sydney, where I live. But it was only up until 18 months ago when my wife we both bought each other an e-bike. And whenever we travel now in the car, in the RAV4, we throw our bikes in the back. And I tell you what, cycling, if you're a couple, it's so good for marriages, isn't it? It keeps the marriage thing together nice and tight, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I have nothing but positive things to say about the rail trail, and may the passion continue with the committee that's here today. It's wonderful. So congratulations to everybody.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Mike. Thank you so much. That's really good. And I mean, I think as a committee member, I think we'll be calling on your services. I think you're very well connected and clearly media savvy. So I think we need to have a bit of a sit down and a strategize to try and further the cause, or expand the reach, especially in New South Wales. I know they're slowly getting the idea clearly with Northern Rivers going gangbusters, but as you say, Crookwell is certainly a missing piece.
For me, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. You've got safety. These pictures just tell the story. There's so much enjoyment. There's smiles on people's faces. And I think the resistance basically comes from the farmers. And I can understand their side of the argument. They feel that with so many people riding over sections of their land, there could be litter, there could be pollution left behind. Look, from the rail trails that I've ridden, I don't see too much of that, if at all, any of it. So I think we have to educate those that are against the building and construction of rail trails. How we do it, I don't know, but I dare say there's only a small section of the community, of the population, that's against the rail trails. And from what I can tell, it's the landowners. And if we can convince them that we'll look after their property just as much as we look after the rail trails, then we're on a winner, I think.
Exactly. No, very, very well spoken. Very well said. Very well said. No, thank you so much. That's fantastic, inspirational, I would say, to hear the journey from that you've taken us on. That's really tremendous. Perhaps we'll open it up to the floor if anybody's got some questions for Michael to answer. Has anybody got a question out there? If you're okay with that, Mike.
Sure, no problem.
You go, Peter.
This short video of yours going to be accessible?
Oh, of course. I took those pictures. It's on my YouTube channel, which I haven't really worked on. I haven't had time. It's yours. Okay. Take it, keep it, promote it, do whatever you want with it.
Good, thank you. That's very appreciated. Thanks a lot. Eh?
And look, I'm happy to create more videos like this. It would be nice to have a little bit of a budget. That video that you saw earlier, it was done with this.
Right, good one.
And you try and ride the Tumbarumba Rail Trail, especially with those grills, holding this. And I didn't fall over, but I came pretty close. I can tell
dangerous.
You.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're happy to discuss a lot.
If I could have a camera operator, or I have got one, actually, it's my son-in-law. I'm happy to do more videos and more little packages like that in a more professional sort of way. So think about that in the future. If you can utilize my skills as a storyteller by video. I'd be happy to do that. That's an idea that I can pass on to you.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Kathy.
Yes, I'd just like to support what Michael said about cycling being good for couples. A lot of women, as we know, are very afraid to ride on the roads, even if they've been riding from a young age, and most of us haven't been riding from a young age. So to be able to get on a rail trail where you know you're safe from traffic and you've usually got someone there to support you as well, they're just fantastic. And to see so many families and children and couples is really satisfying to me.
Kathy, you know, I've come across a lot of women groups over the last few years who enjoy the bicycle, mostly mature women as well. I'm actually traveling to, well, first of all, there's an organization in Victoria. It's called Wheel Women, Wheel, W-H-E-E-L, Women. And what that organization does is encourage women of the mature age to gain confidence to ride the bike, not on the road, but on cycleways and rail trails. And that group has grown in number quite considerably since it first started, I would say probably 5 years ago. At the end of next month, October, I'll be traveling to Brisbane to take part in a fundraiser by an all-women's organization called SOTS, S-O-T-S. And that stands for Sisters of the Saddle. Okay. And they're doing a 3-day bike ride from Brisbane up to Toowoomba. And guess what? It's an all-women's group, but they've nominated me as the patron. And I'm no woman, I can tell you. So yeah.
Where we live, there's a person who runs a cycle tours, and he takes lots of women-only groups because they, I suppose, aren't intimidated by the fact that there's some gung-ho men who might show them up.
Yeah.
So
I personally, I love it when I see a group of women riding in a group, whether it be on the road or on the rail trail or wherever. The more women that ride the bike, I think it'll transcend down towards their children, their grandchildren, perhaps. Their children and grandchildren would say, "Well, look, if grandma or mum can ride a bike, there's no reason why I can't." And I want to ride with mum and grandma as well. So you know, it's great.
Thank you for your support.
Oh, you're welcome.
We've got John Watsford wants to say something.
Hi there.
Hi, John.
Hi. You mentioned the farmers objecting to the rail trails, and that's one of the things on the Tumbarumba trail with the electric fences. I think there's one farm where the electric fence is actually on the rider's side, which seems to be a little strange. You can understand keeping the animals out, but keeping the riders out of the farm is one thing. Fortunately, I think it's only one farm. But that's really the issue, isn't it? The rail trails, the rail trail is actually owned by the government, not the farmers. So you could argue, why do you want your cattle, sheep, etc., on public land? And I think that's really the issue that has to be addressed with farmers, that it's not their land, it's government land, it's the rail, certainly in New South Wales, and I think it applies in the other states as well. But the Gilmore Valley is such a beautiful valley on the way up to Batlow. The farmers are objecting, and even in Batlow, they've got the red bikes and the yellow bikes, which is but apparently the shopkeepers and what have you, and the people who live in Batlow are more than keen to have the cycleway, whereas it's the farmers down in the Gilmore Valley who don't want it.
Yeah.
So I think the group really has to get into convincing the farmers, and I suspect that was the problem at Crookwell, to can change their view that really having the cycleway there is not really the biological issue they claim, but it's something that improves the tourism of the area.
Well, that's what I said earlier. I don't think the farmers and those that object towards the construction of the rail trail get it. They don't understand. All they care about is their own property, and that's fair enough. I mean, I'd probably question if there was a road being built through my backyard on my property. But if there are benefits and the spin-offs are positive, I think they have to be educated. The farmers and those that object have to be educated. And like I said before, if we can convince them and show them the way and show them why it would be beneficial for both them, the farmers, the landowners, and those that live in the council regions, then I think we're moving in the right step. I just think education is the key. I don't think the farmers or the landowners really understand the cycling revolution, the cycling culture that is just growing with every passing day.
Yeah, but a lot of that land is not their land.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, why are they jumping up and down then? What rights do they have to jump up and down?
Exactly. I don't know. Good question.
It's all
I
part
don't
of
get
the
that. I
political
don't
process.
understand that.
It's
Why are
all
we
part of the
arguing?
political process where the local government won't do anything unless there's widespread community support. And those farmers are part of the community, and you have to bring them on side. So we're very aware of it, and we'll be happy to, I mean, more positive messages that we can get out there, the better. And that's where things like what you're doing, Mike, can help out with that. Yeah.
It's good health. It's healthy living. It's
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys. I'm 62.
Here, but,
I'm 62, but I feel like an 18-year-old, and the bicycle makes me feel that way.
I think we all feel that way.
Well, that's it. We're preaching to the choir, aren't we? We're all
exactly
on
right.
side here. It's
we have to preach to those who are against the construction of the rail trail. We have to preach to them.
Yeah, we could have a discussion about biosecurity if you want to talk about something different, but
no,
let's not do that.
There's plenty of resources we have in this tonight.
That's fantastic. Excellent. That's great. Thank you so much. I think looks like everybody's done their questions. You've given us inspiration and more focus.
Keep me in the loop, and if there's anything I can do, I've got a lot of time on my hands now. As you probably know, I'm not working for SBS anymore. My main aim in life these days is to try and encourage, through my profile, to try and encourage as many people to put their backsides on saddles. And I'm a bit of a cycling advocate these days. So that's what I try and do. And that's why I'm interested in the Rail Trail Australia movement. So look, my life, had you asked me 20 years ago that I would be riding my bicycle and accumulating up to 12,000 kilometers a year, I would say you've got rocks in your head. But that's what I'm doing. I'm up to 8,500 Ks already, and we're into the middle of September. So I'll probably crack 12,000 again. I ride the bike 6 or 7 times a week. I'm going up to Winton in Queensland in the Outback next week for an event there called the Outback Festival. It's it's a quirky little 5-day event where they have dunny derbies, they have thong throwing contests. There's a big gala dinner where 400 people will attend. It's a bit like cycling's answer to the Birdsville races. They fly in from everywhere. We have entertainers, but the big event is the 100-kilometre bike ride in the Outback. And if you know Winton, well, if you don't know Winton, let me tell you, it's like that. It's as flat as a pancake, the terrain around there. The highest climb that I'll be doing, or everybody that's signed up will be doing, will be the speed hump in the car park at the local Woolies. Everything else is flat around there. So it's 100 Ks, but that's what it is. I'm going up there and preaching the word of the bicycle. And I'm also involved with mental health. I had a bit of a mental meltdown, I guess, after I left my former employer. And I'm with an organization called the Mental Wheels Foundation, where it combines the love of the bicycle with mental health awareness. So that's another thing that keeps me busy these days. And I'm also working on a podcast called The Domestiques, which basically focuses on the sport of cycling. So that's what keeps me busy. I'm at home a lot these days. And let me tell you, having worked ever since I was an 18-year-old and finishing up 2 years ago with my former employer, I can tell you categorically that the 5-day working week is overrated. You believe me?
Yeah. No, I'm following your lead. In fact, that's the way to go. Definitely the way to go. Wonderful. Well, let me thank you so much for your contribution tonight. It's been lovely to meet you. We hope to do that in person, of course, at the next convenient time. We'll get to strategize and to think about how to use your services. But Rail Trails Australia thanks you very much for coming on tonight as a guest speaker and inspiring us with your stories and history of growth in cycling. It's just tremendous. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Stephen, and thanks to everybody for listening. I rattled on a little bit at the start regarding my career, but I'm very proud of the legacy that I've left behind. I mean, there are millions, hundreds of thousands of people watching this big bike race across the other side of the world called the Tour de France. And even if you don't follow cycling, everyone knows that the Tour de France is a bike race on the other side of the world, and they chase this yellow jersey. So I'm very proud of the legacy that I've left behind, and I'm very proud of the fact that I'm riding a bicycle for recreational reasons these days. So thanks very much.
And you absolutely should be, Michael. Absolutely. I have many friends who are our age who have never been on a bike for all intents and purposes, but watch the Tour de France. It's not about the bike; it's about the scenery and the food. So the Gabriel Gattei spin-offs are fantastic. And your voice and commentary within that is very much integral to that growth and enthusiasm.
And just on that,
well done.
Thank you so much. And there are so many cycling holidays now. People of our ages going to Europe or South Australia or wherever,
New Zealand,
and taking their bikes, but not necessarily just to ride, to take in the wine, take in the good food, take in the history, take in the scenery, take in the architecture. And that's what the coverage of the Tour de France does. And that's what I try to do as a presenter. For me, it wasn't just the sport. I soon realized that people are watching this coverage over 3 weeks for very many different reasons. Gabriel Gattei, the scenery, the chateaus, the vineyards, and of course, there's the pushing of pedals, which for many years I thought, God, the sport itself is actually secondary sometimes. It's not necessarily, people aren't necessarily watching it for the pushing of pedals. They're watching it for everything else that it has to offer. It's such a unique event, the Tour de France. It's a television spectacle like no other. And when you take into consideration NRL or AFL or basketball or soccer and all the other sports, tennis, where they're all played and held in the one court, in the one location. Cycling, like the Tour, well, it takes you to different places. It's a form of escapism, I guess.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And as Kathy said, the tourism, the cycle tourism, very much depends on off-road usage. I think
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
on-road usage in cycle tourism is there, but small. And I think the growth is the off-road cycling, which we all clearly are strong advocates for, and can see that that's where the funds and focus need to be generated. So anyway, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and your reminiscence. That's tremendous. And
right.
I guess at this stage we'll call the meeting to an end. So
All
thank
right.
you all for your attendance. Thank you all for attending the AGM, as boring as every AGM is. That's why we have a guest speaker second, not first, so that you get sucked into being at the AGM and then have the joy of the speaker after that. So thank you all very much for your time. We look forward to seeing you all and the rail trails or at meetings about the rail trails.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Cheers.
Thank